I was in Portland for 3 months when my family decided my life's work was theirs to sell. That's the sentence I keep coming back to, not because it's dramatic, though it is, but because it took me a long time to say it out loud without my voice shaking. 3 months. I was gone for 3 months, doing the thing I had spent 6 years building toward, and in that window, the people who were supposed to be proud of me decided that what I'd built was actually theirs to liquidate. Let me back up. My grandmother, my mom's mom, passed away 4 years ago. She left me her house. Not the whole property, just the house itself, the structure on the lot, which she'd owned outright since the 80s. My grandfather had built it in 1974, and when he died, she stayed in it alone for 22 years. When she passed, my mom and her two sisters inherited the land, but the house, the actual building, she left specifically to me, with a separate deed. It was unusual, her estate lawyer told us, separating the building from the land like that, but she'd done it intentionally. She'd updated the deed 6 months before she died. She knew exactly what she was doing. My grandmother and I had a relationship that I still don't fully have words for. She taught me woodworking when I was 9. By the time I was in high school, I was spending every weekend at her place, refinishing furniture, building shelves, learning how to read grain and how to feel when a joint was right. She used to say that wood remembers everything, the weather it grew through, the hands that shaped it. She said the same about people. After she died, I spent 2 years converting her house into a working studio. I took out a small loan, did most of the labor myself, and turned it into a legitimate custom furniture workshop. I had a lathe, a bandsaw, a planer, a full set of hand tools she'd left me, and a dust collection system I'd saved up for 18 months to afford. The studio was generating real income, not side hustle money, actual income. I had 4 ongoing client contracts and a wait list. My brother had none of that. He's 2 years older than me and has been starting a company in some form or another since he was 24. The first one was a meal prep delivery service that lasted 8 months, then a dropshipping operation, then something with cryptocurrency that I genuinely never understood. When I left for Portland, he was in the middle of launching what he called a home services marketplace, essentially an app to connect homeowners with contractors. He'd been working on it for about a year. He had no funding, no paying users, and as I would later find out, about $31,000 in personal debt. My parents believed in him completely. They always had. He was the one who was going to make it big. I was the one who worked with her hands, which in my family had always been said with a kind of affectionate condescension, like I'd chosen a charming but impractical life. My studio doing well confused them more than it impressed them. The Portland opportunity came through a furniture collective I'd been part of for 3 years. They had a residency program, 3 months, shared workspace, mentorship from established makers, and access to a client base in the Pacific Northwest that I could never have reached from Central Ohio. It was the kind of thing I'd been hoping for since I started. I applied twice before I got it. I arranged everything before I left. I paused my active client contracts with their agreement. Everyone was understanding, which said something about the relationships I'd built. I locked up the studio. I left a spare key with my neighbor across the street, a retired woman named Helen who had known my grandmother for 40 years. I told my parents I'd be back in late September. I did not give anyone in my family a key to the studio. I want to be clear about that. Portland was everything I needed it to be. I worked harder those 3 months than I had in years, in the good way, the way that feels like growth instead of grinding. I made things I hadn't known I was capable of making. I met people who took what I did seriously in a way that still catches me off guard when I think about it. I was happy. I was genuinely, straightforwardly happy. My brother called me in August. He said he needed to talk, but that it wasn't urgent. We could catch up when I was home. I should have pushed harder on that call. I know that now. But he sounded fine, a little vague, and I had a deadline on a dining set, and I let it go. I drove back to Ohio on a Sunday. I remember it was raining when I pulled off the highway, that flat gray September rain that turns everything the same color. I stopped at the grocery store, got food for the week, and drove out to the property. The studio looked the same from the outside. I noticed the gravel in the driveway had been disturbed. Tire tracks, more than one vehicle. I told myself someone had probably turned around. I unlocked the door. The lathe was gone. I stood in the doorway for a long moment. I thought I was confused, sleep deprived from the drive. I walked inside. The bandsaw was gone. The planer was gone. The dust collection system, the wall mounted tool cabinet, the workbench my grandfather had built, gone. The shelving units I'd made and installed were still there. The hand tools in their case were still there. The hand tools in their case were still there, probably because they were locked. But everything large, everything that made this piece a functioning workshop rather than an empty room, gone. I sat down on the floor. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for the light to change. Then I called my mom. She answered on the second ring, which told me she was waiting for it. "You're home," she said. Not a question. "What happened to my equipment?" I said. There was a pause, and then she said in this very careful, measured voice, "We need to talk about some decisions we made while you were gone. Can you come over for dinner? Tell me what happened to my equipment." Another pause. "Then your brother needed the space." I asked her to explain that. She said my brother had been going through a difficult time financially, that the studio was sitting empty while I was away, that they thought, she kept saying "we thought" like a shield, that since I wasn't using it, it made sense to let him use it as collateral for a business loan. She said they'd had some of the larger equipment appraised and sold to help him cover an immediate debt. "You sold my equipment," I said. "The important thing," she said, "is that your brother is back on his feet, and you have all your hand tools. You can still work anywhere, sweetheart. A good craftsperson doesn't need a fully outfitted shop to—" I hung up. I sat in that empty room for another hour. Then I called a locksmith and had the locks changed. Then I called Helen. Helen told me everything. She'd seen 2 trucks come to the property in July. She'd seen my parents there. She'd seen my brother directing the movers. She tried to call me and realized she didn't have my number. I'd only given her the key for emergencies, not my contact information, which I have regretted every day since. She said she thought about calling the police, but didn't know if she had standing to do that, if it was a family matter, if maybe I'd given permission, and she didn't know about it. "I'm so sorry, honey," she said. "I should have done something." I told her it wasn't her fault. I meant it. That night, I found a property and real estate attorney in Columbus. I emailed her at 11 p.m. and she responded the next morning. I went to her office that Tuesday. Her name was Angela, and she was the kind of lawyer who listens to you for 10 minutes before she says a word, and when she does speak, every word is load-bearing. I told her the whole situation. I told her about the deed. I told her about the deed. I told her about the equipment. I told her my parents had sold the equipment without my knowledge or consent. She asked me if I had documentation, purchase receipts, the deed, photos of the equipment in place, any contracts or insurance records that listed the equipment. I had all of it. I keep meticulous records. It's the same instinct that makes me care about proper joinery. Everything lives in a folder on my laptop and a backup drive. She went quiet for a moment, looking at the deed. "Your grandmother separated the building from the land," she said. "Yes, and the equipment inside the building. Your purchase records show that's entirely yours." "Yes, and no one in your family has any ownership claim to the contents of that building." "No." She looked up. "Then what they did was theft. Specifically, your parents converted your personal property, sold assets that belong to you without your knowledge or authorization. That's conversion under Ohio law. Depending on the total value of what was taken, this could be a felony." I had estimated the equipment value at around $28,000, including the dust collection system. Angela said we had a few options. We could file a civil suit for the full value of the equipment plus damages. We could also file a police report, which would trigger a criminal investigation separately from any civil action. She was straightforward with me. If we filed a police report, this would become something my family couldn't manage quietly. It would follow my brother. It might follow my parents. She asked me what I wanted. I told her I wanted my $28,000 back. She said, "Do you want to give them a chance to pay it before we escalate?" I thought about that for a long time. Then I said yes. One chance. Angela drafted a demand letter. It was 3 pages long and detailed every piece of equipment, every purchase date, every appraised value, and the total $28,400. It cited the specific Ohio statute for conversion of personal property. It gave my parents and my brother 30 days to respond with either full repayment or a repayment agreement, and it stated plainly that failure to respond would result in both a civil suit and a police report. My dad called me the day they received it. I hadn't spoken to either of my parents since I hung up on my mom. I let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times. On the 4th call, I picked up. "This is insane," he said. "You're going to call the police on your own family." "You sold my equipment," I said. "We were trying to help your brother with my property that you had no legal right to touch. You were gone. The studio was sitting empty. We didn't think that's the problem," I said. "You didn't think it was necessary to ask me." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your brother is drowning. You could be more understanding." I remember looking out the window when he said that. There's a tree in the backyard of my grandmother's house, my house, a big red oak that she and my grandfather planted when they moved in. It was October by then, and the leaves were starting to turn. "I understand exactly what happened," I said. "You decided my things were available to take because you've always thought what I do is less serious than what he does. You didn't ask me because you knew I'd say no, and you told yourself it was fine because somewhere in the back of your mind you believe my work doesn't really count." He started to say something. I kept going. "I love you, but I need $28,400. You have 30 days. I hung up. They didn't pay in 30 days. On day 31, Angela filed the civil suit. She also helped me file the police report. The detective who took the report was matter-of-fact about it. She said this type of case, family members converting assets during an absence, was more common than most people realized. She said the documentation I had was excellent. She said they'd be in touch. My brother called me the night the civil suit was filed. He was not calm. He said I was destroying the family over money. He said I was selfish. He said I'd always been jealous of him. He said a lot of things, and I listened to most of them because I wanted to understand if there was anything in there that I needed to hear. There wasn't. When he was done, I said, "You had a year to build your company. You chose to do it by taking what was mine instead of building something of your own. That's not my fault." He hung up on me. The civil case took 7 months to resolve. It didn't go to trial. About 4 months in, my parents' attorney reached out to Angela about a settlement. My parents agreed to pay the full $28,400 plus Angela's fees, which they covered in 2 installments. The criminal case resulted in my brother receiving a misdemeanor charge. My parents were listed as co-conspirators, but charges against them were ultimately not pursued because they made full restitution. My brother had to complete a diversion program and pay a separate fine. I want to tell you that the money fixed everything, but that's not how it works. $28,400 doesn't buy back the 3 months I lost rebuilding my equipment list from scratch. I was able to replace most of it, though the workbench my grandfather built is gone forever. It doesn't buy back the clients I lost while I was fighting this instead of working. It doesn't change the fact that when I look at my parents now, I see people who chose to take something from me rather than find another way. We are in contact, barely. Holidays are different now. There's a formality that wasn't there before, a distance I didn't put there and didn't choose, but that exists because of what happened. My brother and I haven't spoken since the night he called me after the suit was filed. I don't know if we will. Helen came over the week after I got the settlement. She brought pie, rhubarb, from a recipe she said my grandmother had given her years ago. We sat in the studio, which had the new equipment in it by then, and drank coffee. She told me stories about my grandmother that I'd never heard. She said my grandmother had been the kind of person who knew exactly what she owned and never apologized for it. I think about that a lot. I think about the deed she updated 6 months before she died, the careful legal separation she made between the land and the house, the way she must have understood something about how families work that I was still learning. She left me the building, not the land. She left me the thing that was mine to fill. I've been filling it back up. Last month, I finished a commission, a walnut dining table, 8 feet long, hand-cut dovetails on the breadboard ends. The client drove 4 hours to pick it up. She stood in the studio and ran her hands over the surface and didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "Someone made this. You can feel it. That's what I'm doing here. That's what I was always doing." There's something I've been sitting with since all of this ended, and I don't know that I have a clean way to say it, but I'll try. What my parents did wasn't an accident. I've heard that word used around this situation: mistake, accident. They didn't think it through, and I've had to gently but firmly push back on all of it. An accident is when you knock something over. What happened here was a series of deliberate choices. They chose not to call me. They chose not to ask. They chose to look at something I had built, something that had my grandmother's handprints all over it in the most literal sense, and decided it was available. That takes more than a lapse in judgment. That takes a belief, one they probably held for years without examining it, that my work was a lower-off thing than my brother's ambitions. And that belief had consequences, real, legal, financial consequences. Not because I wanted them to, but because that's how it works. When you treat someone's property as if it belongs to you, the law has a name for that. When you sell something you don't own, there are statutes that address it. My parents are intelligent people. They simply never expected those statutes to be pointed at them by their own daughter. I think that's the part that shocked them most. Not what I did, but that I knew how. I think about my grandmother a lot when I think about this. She was a woman who understood something about the relationship between work and ownership that a lot of people in my family never absorbed. She built things with her hands. She maintained that house for decades on her own after my grandfather died. She knew, without needing to be told, that what you make with your effort is yours. Not theoretically yours, not yours when convenient, but yours in a way that deserves to be protected and documented and defended. She updated that deed 6 months before she died. I don't think that was coincidence. I think she knew exactly what she was leaving behind, and she wanted to make sure it landed somewhere it would be respected. I spent a long time being the kind of person who assumed good faith in people I loved. I don't think that's wrong. I think it's actually something worth keeping. But good faith isn't the same as naivety, and trusting people isn't the same as leaving yourself unprotected. What I learned, not from the lawsuit, but from the whole long arc of it, is that the most important thing you can do for the work you love is treat it seriously. Keep your receipts. Document your ownership. Know your rights. Not because you expect the people around you to act badly, but because taking your own work seriously means building structures around it that hold even when things go wrong. Angela told me once, near the end of the case, that the clients who come to her best prepared are almost always the ones who win. Not because preparation creates luck, but because preparation is what makes it possible to act clearly when everything else is chaotic. I had my receipts. I had my photos. I had my deed. When my family took what was mine, I had everything I needed to respond, not out of anger, but out of clarity. That's what I want to hold on to, not the anger, which faded, not the grief over the workbench I'll never get back, just the clarity. The understanding that integrity is something you build into your life structurally, not just emotionally. That the same care you put into the work itself has to go into protecting it. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and honestly for the people who wronged you is refuse to pretend that what happened didn't happen. The walnut table I finished last month is sitting in someone's dining room in Columbus right now. 8 feet long, dovetail joints. made in a studio that is still mine. That's enough.